From multiple quick thought-out locations in Minneapolis or near enough, this is Nice Games Club, the show where nice game devs talk gaming and game development.
I'm Ellen Burns-Johnson, and I make nice games.
I'm Stephen McGregor, and I make nice games.
And I'm Arthur Croy, and I too make nice games.
For this week's episode, it's another Nice Games Jam. We've just been given a prompt, and we're going to come up with a complete game or a design document or something else, I guess, by the end of this episode. Will it work? We and you are about to find out. And so, if everyone is ready, let's start.
Okay, so we haven't done one of these in a while.
It's been a long time, yeah.
It feels like every time we do one, it's like, oh, we haven't done one of these in a while. And then, like, I don't know if that's ever true or not true. It just always feels like that, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's because, like, they're kind of special treats for us.
They are.
Like, we talked about this before the show started. Like, there's not a lot of prep we have to do. Because the whole point is that we get an idea sprung on us and we have to think quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So
what an idea it was.
Podcaster's dream.
Yeah.
It has. I think it has been a while though, because you said the last time that you did a recording was in the before times.
Oh,
right,
yes.
right. And when we say before times, we talk about before Ellen joined us as a permanent host.
Right.
That's all we mean.
Also before the pandemic.
There's that too. Yeah, actually, the last Game Jam episode we did was the last one we recorded in person. It was the last episode we recorded in person. That's right.
I think so.
Yeah. Because we released it after everybody was at home. I remember I put a special note in the show notes so people wouldn't be like afraid for us or angry at us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I do remember that.
Yeah. It's like, oh no, but like a lot. There was that 2 weeks of a lot of podcasts being like, okay. I know I'm like yucking it up with Rob Lowe or whatever, but we did this interview months ago or whatever. So like we had to do that too. I'm not sure that listeners didn't understand that, you know. But you feel the need to clarify. But now we're back with another Nice Games Jam.
Yes.
And one of the things we did last time, which was interesting, is we did one that was a purely a design document. Right. It wasn't a game that you could play, which is sort of the theme that we've done for a lot of these jams. We sort of decided that, no, let's do something that's a design document so that it could be a full-on digital game. It allowed us to be a little bit more ambitious. And we figured now that we're recording remotely, we've already proven that we can do this without a bunch of trinkets in front of us and handing around tokens and stuff, which is what we thought we needed to make an episode like this work. But we do have other resources at our disposal that Ellen has brought to us. Right, Ellen?
Mm-hmm. We're going to use Mural, which is a virtual whiteboarding tool. That's a lot of fun and really fast. And we just went through a 5-minute tutorial on it, and I think we're ready to use it. So we'll use it while we're, creating an audio recording, and then we'll also take some GIFs or some images of it to share after, with the show notes and everything.
Yeah. So what else do we need to talk about before we get into it? First thing here I see on the notes is this is episode 179. Now, why is that number important? Yes. Does anyone want to take a guess?
Is it a Star Trek thing?
It is! Wow, Stephen! We've converted you!
Every time.
Stephen can see it coming now. That's right. For fans of Star Trek The Next Generation, you may know that there were 178 episodes of that show. And one of the fun things that show did when it did its 80th episode, which gave it to be more episodes than the original series, is they made kind of a sly reference to it in the episode. And so now that we have recorded more episodes than any Star Trek ever, I feel very accomplished. So I don't know. It's also silly and embarrassing to be so happy about it, but it's very cool that we've done this much content, and it's and hours and hours of it. And I do sometimes think, like, we have all these old episodes, those ones we did in 2016 and the very first ones, and the video episodes we did, and the stuff we were trying and way back when. And I do hope that listeners who have joined us more recently, peek back to some of those old ones, because there's some gems in there. And the nature of a podcast is ephemeral, right? It's especially a weekly show. It's sort of the weekly update or whatever. But one of the things that I'm very proud of for Nice Games Club is that a lot of our content is pretty timeless. It's maybe not always the best on the topic that we're presenting, but it doesn't expire. And I feel really good about that. Even the ones where we talk about recent events, we try to give it some context that we know will be valuable from here on. So anyway, milestone for us.
Well-
Number might not mean much to you, but for an old Star Trek fan like me, that number has special value.
What's the saying? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So
Is that a saying?
yeah, I think so. I don't remember who said it. Someone will figure it out and we'll put it in the show notes.
The other thing that this will be too late for you to act on this by the time, but I wanted to mention it now because in our calendar math, it's happening right now. Itch put out another one of those big bundles. We talked about this a while back when they did a GDC relief bundle that we submitted Widget Satchel to. This one is for a far greater cause. It's the Itch racial justice bundle, and from where sitting, it launched yesterday, and it's already raised $500,000,
Which is amazing.
Hey, real quick, Mark here from the future. $8 million was the total. The bundle just ended a couple hours ago from where I'm editing this episode. Incredible. We'll have more details in the show notes. But now back to me not knowing how successful this thing is actually going to get.
Awesome.
Yeah.
there are 750 games in there, and that could be
Oh,
yours.
there's 750?
That's right, 700, including like big indie hits like Night in the Woods, Minute,
Yeah.
Overland, real like top tier indie games, and also a bunch of Minneapolis games are in there as well. So we put Widget Satchel in there. We're very happy to be part of that. You can get Verdant Skies, you can get Joggernauts, you can get Color Jumper, bunch of great devs, games we've talked about on this show before. So if you're looking to get into some of those Minneapolis games we've been talking about, this is a real quick, easy way in. But of course, also just like heavy hitters of indie titles are in there. Something like a $3,400 value at full price for $5 or more. So like,
Yeah.
That's
of course, it's past time now. The bundle will have ended by the time you hear this episode. Hopefully, we'll have put the mentioned in the show notes for episodes, but still can. But man, $500,000 already. So I can only imagine when this episode comes out how much it will have raised by then. It is so exciting, and I can't imagine that having Widget Satchel in there, for example, is like moving the needle that much. I can't pretend, but I'm so proud of the indie community, and particularly the Itch for just spinning this up in a couple of days, and then just saying, hey, anyone want to be part of this? And everybody wanting to be a part of this. So it's really cool to see a lot of that stuff in there, and the fact that people are going crazy buying it, and it reaches a type of consumer that wouldn't necessarily think to give $20 to a cause. Like we're all out there trying to make sure that like if we got a little extra money hanging around, we give it to some place that matters and some place that can do some. And we've all felt in a way obligated to contribute what we can if we can't be out in the streets or be directly. Have a lot of power to lobby or make change. A lot of us have a little money. And so that's an effort we can do. But at the same time, it's nice to have something which is just like, hey, $5 gets you $3,400 worth of games. And then who cares what motivates the person to give the $5 or more? And that unlocks another source of revenue for these causes. And it's so exciting. I'm very pleased.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful stuff. I'm glad that we were able to participate in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an example of the internet at its finest. Like doing something fast, doing something big, bringing people together within a couple days to do something new. It's really cool to see the indie dev community come together like that in such a big way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this or whether it's a really good topic for today, but do you know much, or can you speak to how the funding is going from the bundle to causes?
Oh, like the actual mechanism, or do you mean the actual split for those places?
I guess the mechanism. I haven't read the mechanics of the way that they're funneling funding to the causes they've chosen, but might be worth just a.
What I know is that the Itch has pledged to it's not taking any of its own cut. So the fraction it takes as a distributor. From most sales, they're foregoing that. So as far as I know, outside of like processing fees, which I'm not sure through Stripe or PayPal or however people do. Other than that, I believe 100% will be going to split in 50-50 between the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund and the Community Bail Fund. But I don't know what the mechanism is. It probably, and this is, for itch, it's not Steam, right? So like, it's kind of just the one guy who runs itch, which is sort of incredible. So as far as I know, we just trust that when all that money ends up in itch's bank account, then they'll just transfer it or write a check or something. I'm not really sure what the mechanism is. It's kind of an interesting topic for people who run things like this, is like how to do it, but also how to like, or get the trust of people that you are going to do it.
Right.
Well,
and if they do it again, I mean, like that they're doing it now and that it was so successful in just a day or so is perhaps portent of additional efforts on other things.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to learn a little bit more before they run the next charity bundle with almost 1,000 games in it.
This thing is unprecedented.
That's so many
but
games.
Also, there have been developers who've gathered together on itch, because itch makes it very easy to do what they call a co-op bundle, where you can get a bunch of different games all together, and then the person who creates the bundle can then decide where the money goes, either split between the developers or manually assigned or all to one place. We did a co-op bundle when COVID started, the Twin Cities Indie Dev Stay Inside bundle, I think is what we called it. And that was pretty fun and somewhat successful. And it was really easy to set up on itch. They have really good tools for it. But itch itself is running this one. But other than this big, enormous one, there are other like Black Lives Matters bundles that are available on itch that have also been pretty successful. I think there's one that has like 20 or 25 games. And those are run by the developers, right? That's not itch doing it. That's the developers doing that. And then the developers then they get to curate their own like, where does that money go? And so it's not just the community at large, but it's pockets of the community. Individual actors in the community are all doing cool stuff with the tools that are available to them. And itch is such a great resource for, we're video games. Like there's kind of a limit to what we can do, right? In these times. But like the fact that everyone is straining to reach those limits is really heartening.
I agree. Should we get started making games?
We put it off long enough.
So this one's interesting in that my brother, Charles McGregor, he's given us a prompt this time. So our prompt is make a 2D fighter with no combat.
Yeah, no,
this is hard.
Okay, this isn't just me putting off starting the jam longer. Well, maybe it is. But let's hear the story of how you dragged this prompt out of Charles.
Sure. Okay. Me and Charles have been on a show before, or together on the show before, and we are notorious for the way we talk to one another, which is basically just arguing. And so I asked Charles if he wanted to send us a prompt for the thing, and he was like, okay. But what he thought us a prompt was like a global game jam prompt, so like transmission or waves or whatever other prompts were.
Right, he wanted to give us a theme. Which, it's not his fault. Like, that's what you would think. We can't blame him for never, ever listening to an episode of his brother's podcast.
Right. Yeah, all 100, and not any of the 179 of them that are out. Yeah.
Right.
But, so the first thing he gave me was multiple prompts, which listeners of the show know that that's not a very descriptive prompt that we normally get. So I was like, can you give us a little bit more detail in that? Then the next prompt he gave us was 2 perspectives, which is like, that doesn't mean anything either. So then I argued with him back and forth. And then I was like, no, we normally get like a concept or something, like a sentence, not like a theme in the Global Game Jam. And then his example was like make a 2D fighter with no combat. And then I was like, yeah, like that. And then I asked him if that was the prompt. And he's like, yeah, let's go with that.
And like the prompt we've gotten from our boyfriend Dylan in the past, they have, some of them have, a lot of, man, they're all, I've loved every one of them. But some of them are just like, oh my God, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so this, I think, at least for me, this falls into I do not want to do this. But that means it's probably the best it could be. So kudos to Charles for eventually giving us something to challenge us.
Getting to the point, yeah.
And Steven, you're going to have to fight all of your standard fighting game design instincts because there's a particular quirk to this, which is with no combat.
Well, it's actually... Oh, what does that mean specifically, though? Because I have actually been thinking about this for a long time. Actually, like, I've always wanted to make a fighting game that was where you, like, argue or debate with somebody else instead of punch them.
Right.
But, like, arguably, you can combat with your voice. One could think.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
know.
What is it? Does fight and combat make this a mutually like? Does it just make a 2D? Like, is that where we're like eliminating the common
I
denominator?
don't think so. So I'm really glad that Stephen's here with this prompt, because I like that whole idea. What does a fighter game feel like? I think is the thing we have to capture, but we have to do it in a way that isn't like physically violent. And the thing that immediately came to mind when I was thinking about this prompt was that card game War.
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
so the name is War,
Yeah.
but you guys ever played that one where it's like,
I mean, play
You got,
is
like,
a
2 or
bit of
3
a strong word for what you do with that, but
but like it's that feeling of go 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 go
yeah,
go,
yeah.
and you're head to head with something or other people, and it's like fast, and it's the loops are resolved really really quickly. And while there might be like higher, I don't think there's actually any higher level strategy to War, the card game.
No.
But like there's higher level meta for a lot of fighting
Right.
games.
Yeah,
Correct me if I'm okay. This is where I'm talking about things that I don't really know, but I know Steven knows it.
I
So
do know it. Well, okay, so the way I've always
yeah.
thought of fighting games is it's really like a conversation. And that's why I've been thinking of them in this way. Because, like, I feel like you're kind of like you're trying to understand what the other person is doing and then beat them at their own thing.
What I love about this as a metaphor, Stephen, is that it perfectly mirrors the way you talk to your brother. It's like, oh yeah, it's a conversation. You know how when you're always debating and arguing and want to tear them down and defeat them, just like a conversation.
It's the same thing. That's pretty great. Yeah, that is accurate to how I talk. If you think of it in that way, like you can like, if we kind of have the idea where like you need to try to outthink your opponent in a real time sense, then like you can make something that is like a 2D fighter.
That's something
like,
we want to latch onto. Is one of the things about a fighting game is that it's real time.
Yes.
So so that's the hook you want to hold on to.
Right. Yeah. We can't.
Okay,
make
I like
this,
that.
Yeah. I think we need to do that.
I'm gonna add it to our mural board.
Okay.
Oh, I'm way zoomed out. That's a tiny sticky note. Okay. I promise I won't spend most of this podcast talking about things I'm seeing on mural.
You should all see
That would be
Ellen's
boring.
eyes light up when she talks about organizational tools.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Ooh,
Really.
It's an infectious joy. Like it's so valuable to like. Oh man, Post-it notes. Yes.
When we were working on Widget Satchel together, I would beg to be able to move the cards from one column to the next.
Yeah. Pretty great.
Okay. You guys thought you were nerds. Okay, real time.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So that's one thing we should do. I think a lot of fighting games are dynamic and like feel impactful. So like it should be flashy. I think that's a large part of it. That's a weird thing to put in your design. Well, that's not a weird thing to put in your design.
Well, it's a design pillar. We want visual feedback is a key, right? Because that's another thing about fighting games that matters.
Yeah.
And audio. I think audio is going to be really important too.
Mm-hmm. Very true. But like, if you're not doing combat per se, you don't have to be concerned with like hitboxes or hurt boxes or anything like that.
Right. We're not going to just make it a fighting game with it that looks different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
it'll end up playing different too as a result.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess like principally, I think it needs to be some. There's a term in fighting games called Yomi. I don't know where it comes from, but it's basically just like you have an understanding of what your opponent is going to do, and then you try to counteract that. Thinking what your opponent is going to do. So the game. So I think
the game should reward you for guessing what's going to happen.
Yes, yeah, for educated guessing.
Yeah, right.
Because if it's just rock paper scissors where everyone is guessing, that's not an interesting game.
Well, I will say, as whenever I play a fighting game, sometimes I'm just guessing, and sometimes I win.
No, that's actually part of it too, like taking those risks and stuff.
Yeah.
But like, I when you get into like when you play it for enough time, like it's not very fun to just like guess all the time, and then sometimes you win. There should be some
So we want
logic to it.
We want to make a thing that has never been made, which is a fighting game that does not reward button mashing.
Yeah, I guess maybe.
That's not the prompt, Mark.
But maybe we can finally crack it. Like,
it's hard.
You're talking about like you're talking about evaluating your opponent's style and reacting accordingly.
Yeah.
I used to spar in Taekwondo, which was a lot of fun.
Ooh.
And I remember very clearly like one match I had against this person who was even because I used to just come out like kicking when the match started. And then this one person was like kicking like way even faster than I was. So I had to change my entire like approach to the match because she was so aggressive. And I think she was used to using that to intimidate. Yeah. And so I just backed away and just let her frustrate herself until I won.
Yes.
Cool. Nice.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But like that kind of thing is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you had to kind of do that on the fly. So maybe that lesson is we want to make a game where you can't settle into a style. Your strategy has to be reactive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if one-on-one, then that means someone's going to be reacting to something else. But like, maybe that's we want to encourage that. So okay. All of this is actually not a bad just start for any fighting game in terms of what we want to focus on. But it's good to have this so that when we start actually putting together these whatever unusual mechanics we come up with, we can look back to this, see if it fits these themes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. I think that's a good set of pillars to go for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but how do we approach it? Like, what are you doing if you're not fighting?
Yeah, this is a case where, and this might lean into the way I like to design, which is to have the sort of narrative theme and world build that at the same time as you build the mechanics. But I know that's not always the most successful way to design a game. But I feel really motivated to do that here.
Yeah. I think that's a good direction.
Okay.
But yeah, so like, what are you? If you're not punching people, how are you?
What else is there?
What else is there to life?
How am I supposed to have fun if I'm not hitting digital dudes?
Right. So ultimately, it needs to be. We need to, in order to be a fighting game, mechanically, it does not require this, but in order to be called a fighting game, it does need to be. You need to defeat somebody. So, like, I'm thinking, like, would it be interesting, like, two librarians see who can organize their bookshelves faster or whatever. But and like
that's a race.
But like that's a race. It's a little different, right? You don't just win. The other player has to lose.
Yes.
Right?
And they have to lose by your doing, not just like them not being as fast as you, but like you literally defeating them at something.
I'm just imagining tall bookshelves in a library. I don't know why that came to me. But yeah, like I said, I don't know if that's the right theme.
Well, like the way I had been thinking of this in the past is debating. So it could be like in the courtroom. Like you have to anticipate your opponent's arguments or something.
Right.
And then find evidence supporting your arguments while tearing down their arguments.
Okay.
This reminds me of in the immersion program through Glitch, when I went through it, made friends with a guy who we talked a little bit about afterwards, like creating a game around code switching, and he brought up the game series Danganronpa.
Oh, yeah.
You guys heard of that before?
I have.
He talked about that game. I downloaded it, but like lots of games I downloaded, I haven't played it yet. And he talked about it in a lot of the same ways, that like it was verbal, but it was reactive, and you had to like remember the context of what was happening and like dig through what people were saying.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's really helpful.
That could work. Yeah, because like when you can use that information to better understand what your opponent is trying to do and then beat them at it. Maybe it's like, what if you're like competing? Okay, so what if you're like competing to complete some building or some puzzle or something, or a picture or something, and like, but like you can't see what your opponent is creating. Like maybe they have an option to pick from 4 different options or something, and then like at any point, maybe not at any point, I'm not exactly sure, but like you as the opponent can guess what your opponent is trying to create, and then if you guess it, then they have to like start a new drawing over from a new set of.
Oh, that's interesting.
a new list of drawings. I don't know exactly how that all like forms together. It feels a little weird. It feels a little mini gamey versus like gamey, but like
yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, that's
something.
okay though.
Yeah.
So I think what I like in that thematically, and this probably isn't going to speak to the design elements you're proposing, but I like the idea of like two professionals, almost white collar in a way, like architects or researchers or something, like submitting a paper to a journal or like working on the same building, but maybe having influence over its ultimate form.
Sure.
And so, because the thing about a fighting game is that it's not like it's over in 5 minutes. It's over once somebody wins, and so it could take forever.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
because you lose ground and gain ground, like despite the fact that like you have a hit point counter that goes down and down and down, it does feel like the current value is who has the most hit points, right? So that goes back and forth. So something where like Sim Tower or whatever, but it's competitive, and that could work.
Yeah, that's cool.
Like I said, it doesn't speak to the mechanics elements that you're raising, but I
mean, thematically, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, like, let's say that you're a couple of architects designing the next greatest tower.
Yeah.
And you're competing to see who has the most influence. And so, like, if you design this part of the tower before your opponent designs it, then like that gets to be your drawing, and you get to take credit for that part of it.
Yeah.
Maybe, and like maybe like the thing goes off. Maybe like there are like rounds, I guess, and like the each round, like you're trying to draw a particular part of the building.
Oh, each round is a floor. Right, like we don't even make this realistic, right? Like each floor is the round, and then like it's a 5-story building or whatever, and then like in tournament play, it's a 20-story building or whatever.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Okay, but like, how exactly do you compete against another architect in this way? Because like the way I was thinking of it is like you are trying to draw something. One person trying to draw one thing, another person trying to draw another thing. But if you can guess what your opponent is drawing, they have to draw something else, which
the rock paper scissors part, right? Like
with some form of rock paper scissors aspect. I don't know how that exactly works.
I feel like if maybe, and this is where like in fighting games you also often have like a ton of different characters that have a ton of different abilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're an architect, and you're really good at doing like, okay, I'm not an architect, but. And that's going to become apparent right now. You're really good at bathrooms. Like, you're great at bathrooms. You can your bathroom go in really quick. You know how to dry, and your bathroom is extra powered. But your opponent chose a character who's like really good at lounges, and they have like fewer architectural energy points, so they can't make as many lounges. But if they're able to get a lounge in that space, it's going to give them more points or something for that, level.
Oh, you know what I love? You know what? The way we can do this is. I don't have it fully formed, but like you have a space that both players can do things to, add walls or do features, and maybe it's abstracted a little bit, so it's not like add a bathroom, but like, and then ultimately, then the game judges what it is.
Oh, sure,
right. So like, I want if I want to make a lounge, then I want to have as few walls as possible, interior walls, right? And I want to have as many couches and houseplants as I can fit in there. That's how lounges work, right? And but if I want storage space or something, then I want as many like smaller rooms or something. And so then and then once the level is over by some measure, like either you have this many action points or it's timed or something, then the game is like, this is a something, like based on what you've done together. Right.
Okay. But where does the competition come into play with that?
Well, because each player has a different goal, right? Like I want it to be a lounge, but you want it to be a series of cubicles, and then we each start attacking the space with our architectural details, and then once it's done, and maybe there are moves to like knock down a wall that someone puts up or something.
or something.
Yeah.
Or
you
like-
have some destructive moves. You have some constructive moves.
Or like
You have to think
submit
about-
a budget report that precludes somebody else's idea, so that they don't have the resources to build it anymore or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the game ultimately is like, okay, time's up or whatever. Client moves in and it's like, oh, I guess this is a lounge. Like, yeah, there's a toilet over there, but overall it's a lounge. And then that's a win for the player who wanted it to be a lounge.
It's tug of rope. It's tugging on a rope, basically.
Yeah.
I really like the idea. I think, that's pretty wild. And you're gonna end up with some really weird looking room.
And isn't that kind of what we want? Is to like it's not a perfect simulation, but about the feeling, right? So it's going to be ridiculous.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, it's going to be weird. Yeah, I like that idea. I
sense your hesitation. Okay, so like, I know. I feel like I sort of share that. Like this doesn't quite hang together as much as it might sound like it does.
No.
Well, it's like I'm wondering, like, okay, so like how much information does each opponent have about each other?
Yeah,
and things like that. Like, would
because this could make for a good strategy game, like a turn thing, but that's not what we're making. So
right, yeah. So like, so for example, like, would each player know about the prompts that the other person have? Like, if I'm competing against you, Mark, do I know you want to build a lounge, and do you know I want to build a cubicle? I would assume no. Right?
That's a really good question, because, and then how does the player decide what they want, right? Do they for themselves decide, or is it because the character, like they picked Corbusier, so that means they want big, vast spaces, high ceilings, and lots of concrete, or you know what I mean? Like,
actually, that's an interesting idea though. Like, what if the architect you pick gets points based off of the design philosophies or whatever that architect
style
is known for? Like, they don't have to be real architects, but like.
But then does that limit the player's options? Right?
No, not necessarily. As long as they can still get points for any action.
Okay.
They should still be able to, even if like the points are different for each. Like maybe you get more points if you build a bathroom than I get points for it or something.
Yeah.
But like I can still like, though I know that, and so I can try to squeeze you out of building bathrooms. I don't know why we're talking about bathrooms.
Because I brought it up as an example.
Yeah.
It's a crappy example.
Fun.
I am raising the quality level of this podcast. Okay.
but if you know that I know, if you as a person who wants to build bathrooms know that you're trying to stop me from building bathrooms, you could go for some other goal that is like less minor, but maybe like your opponent is like actually helping you build towards that goal. That's a weird description.
I see what you mean. Like something that could punish a player for guessing wrong. Right?
Yeah.
That's pivotal to a fighting game. So like if I know you want to build bathrooms, I'm going to do things to limit the plumbing access in the building. But you instead are just making a giant bathroom that gets you all the bathroom points, and you only need one line or something.
Or you're going for another score that like makes you get, like, maybe one of your additional goals is like have as many walls as possible.
Yeah.
And so like by your opponent trying to block you off from making bathrooms, your opponent is still giving you a bunch of walls, so you still get more points than your opponent.
Oh, okay.
Because like they outplayed themselves. You know?
Yeah. No, I really love that. I think the challenge is like we may just have to assume that we can build that, because I don't know that we can game out like the specific mechanics of that.
Oh yeah, it's going to be too complicated to figure that out in an hour-long podcast.
Yeah, no, I don't mean that we ever thought we were going to have the full list of actions available, but I think we might have to keep it a little in the air. Yeah, because I think going further requires probably prototyping.
Yes.
Okay, so I have some ideas on interface, but before I talk about them, I want to just verify this is the digital game. I assume.
Yeah, I think so.
Because trying to build this on a tabletop would be crazy.
Fighter, right? We've ignored elements of the prompt before, but this prompt is so thin on details that that sort of means probably that it's a. I mean, it could be a board game, but like a fighting game needs to be real time. So
right. It's going to be hard to. I mean, there are actually some board games that are based off of fighting games, but like we don't need to do that. That's a different thing anyway.
Right.
So I'm thinking of this digitally. I'm thinking of this in real time. So like in real time, you're like drawing out walls or planning out the plumbing, or the electrical.
This goes to theme again, but instead of building in real time. It's the sketching in real time, right? You're doing the blueprints. And then once it's done, then that gets built, right?
Right.
I'm not sure how much different that is, but then it gives us more metaphors for like revisions and stuff that don't require wrecking balls, I guess.
Yes.
So can I ask a broader question here? Because like the interface that I'm starting to imagine is a little bit like Hearthstone, actually.
Okay.
Where maybe it's not drawing, but it like you have cards that are actions and things you can place down and objects. And I can go into a little more detail of how I'm thinking of that now, but I want to just ask that question, like, does it need to be drawing, or could it be something like you have a card deck full of options, a digital card deck, and then like when you place them down on the board, it becomes the thing that you were intending to draw?
I like
that. Makes it sound more like a turn-based thing, though.
An inventory of moves, perhaps, is the way to describe it. Instead of having to like, I'm going to draw a wall from this corner to this corner. Instead, you just play the create wall move or something.
Sure. Okay.
I think that speaks a little to the cards, but maybe in more of a real time.
I mean, arguably, like each action you do can have like a certain amount of time it takes to draw it or whatever.
Yes. That's
and then so like when you it's not turn based in that like you can play cards whenever, but once you play a card, there's like a cooldown.
Yeah. But you're talking about the interface, Ellen, and I think there's nothing. I'm not a big fan of digital card games, but that does seem like a way that we could make it work, right?
Yeah.
So let me lay it out a little bit more visually. And I'm not going to use Mural because I recognize we're in a podcast, so I got to be descriptive. Anyway, okay. So like you've got, let's say that you've got your two players and you've got your hands on the sides of the screen. And in the middle of the screen is the floor. Like either it's a top down or kind of like an isometric view of the floor.
Yeah.
And when you draw a card, like, and you bring it over the grid of the floor, it's going to highlight how much space it takes up or something like that by highlighting grid spaces on the floor. And you drop it, and then that thing becomes like 3D or it becomes realized. It's no longer a card. It's a part of the room.
Yeah.
And so here's an interesting thing. If you hide the goals, so like, I don't know that Steven's making a lounge. All I know is my challenge is to make a bathroom. The goals are hidden, but the hands are visible.
Yeah.
And then like you can only have like 4 or 5 cards in your hand, and your opponent can see everything that's in your hand. But then you also have like a deck of digital cards at the bottom that you can continually draw from as fast as you can play.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's like as soon as that card deck is gone, then the round is over.
Right.
So I like the idea of the overhead view, right? And you have the two sides of a board, right, or of a table.
Yeah.
And then you have the blueprint in the middle. And you can each player at any time can choose a zone in the area, like this section or this section, and you sort of the other player can see where you're highlighting or where you're waving your hand over or something. And then you choose your action. But I almost want to limit the actions you can do. So it's like a wall or an object or a piece of infrastructure like a phone line or an Ethernet line or plumbing, and so and then by virtue of a wall here, a drain here, and a pipe here, it's a bathroom, right? And so, but if it's a wall here, and I don't add a certain thing, then it's a break room, right?
Yeah.
And so, so rather than a deck of cards with lots of options, or a limited amount of options depending on what's in your hand, because that is much more just straight up card game then, even if it's real time. What if it's that you can always do like 4 or 5 things, and then they're just mapped to buttons or something?
Right.
Or in fighting game style,
like
they're mapped to, a quarter circle or whatever.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds a lot more like a fighting game.
Mm-hmm.
I really want an architect special to be like
quarter circle X is a curved wall or something.
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Okay. I mean, that's kind of cool. I really want, like, if there were specials, like a super meter or something, I really want someone special to be like, we budgeted out this much for walls, so you can't do any more walls or something.
I like that. Yeah. And you share the budget, right? Like, so maybe part of the strategy is to deplete the drywall budget so that the person can't make all the closets. But in order to do that, you have to build a bunch of hallways you don't want or something.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. I still really like the idea of like each character, each architect having their own design goals
Yeah.
that gives them different points. Because like I think like that also kind of speaks to like, I guess like if you wanted to be a famous architect or something, you would want your designs to be particularly notable, and so like you would have particular goals in mind and things that you're skilled at that you'd want other people to see in your designs.
Yeah.
And so like as an architect, I'm like, oh, I'm the best at making cubicles.
So good at cubes.
So good at cubes. I want everybody to know how good I am at cubes, but I don't want this other person to feel as notable. So I'm going to make sure that this place has more cubicles than other things.
Yeah.
Or something like that, you know? Like it feels like you're like competing more for fame in that way.
Right, you're leaving your mark on the building. Right.
Exactly. Yes.
And so it's almost, it leans into a little bit the view of an architect as a sort of a selfish operator. Like not interested in the lives of the people who are in the building, but more about like putting their stamp on it as an artist. That's maybe not. I don't necessarily subscribe to that view of architecture, but it's funny. Like
I like that aspect of it, and also like as your opponent, you can see what your opponent is trying to do and like anticipate that,
and you learn. You're like, oh, I see what they're going for.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, oh, you know what? Actually, my goal isn't that much different. So if I do this little thing, they'll think I'm working in their favor, but I'm actually messing up their. Yeah, and so that's more of that Yomi that you're describing, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly
And it could be just chaotic, right? It's just like here's the plan, and then you just start adding crap, and then once you both run out of the budget, then it's done, and then you're scored. Yeah. And so rather than a ton of, and so it's just a matter of like. You can kind of button mash, right? You can just put stuff wherever and hope for the best.
Yeah,
but you'd be a better player if you can observe what the other one is doing.
Yes, you can be more strategic. I just pictured the same kind of overhead view, or like the isometric view, but now I have there's a little architect that you choose that's running around and doing these things. So one of the other things you could like that's tricky is you got to, if you're going to do something to mess with your opponent, you got to move your little guy over there really fast.
Yeah. Right, so it's easier to stick in your corner or something. That's a little RTS, actually, in its strategy, right? Is like, do I hole up in my corner or do I be aggressive in terms of the territory?
I think that's kind of interesting, though, Ellen, because like, what if like the wall you place down literally blocks or slows down your opponent from getting to the side of the space? Yeah, it is like an RTS, like you're describing, Mark. I mean, like. Because you've built this wall and slowed down your opponent, you can finish this room and you've ended up made it the bathroom that you really wanted or something like that.
Yeah. So in this case, the metaphor is less the blueprint and more the on-site construction. But we're imagining just a fantasy where the architect goes in and places things.
Yeah.
Which, like, I'm okay with it being even less realistic. Like, but I like the idea.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Of the mechanisms. I think what you're getting at, Ellen, is the mechanisms by which you can thwart the other player.
Yeah.
Rather than just take up space they were going to use, which is maybe a little
silly. Yeah. It does change the visualization a lot, though. If you're thinking about it, are you like two architects standing over a table with, blueprints on the table and red pens and erasers and so on and so forth?
Yeah.
Or are you actually like building the room? And I think picking one of those metaphors is probably important. And it's cool either way.
Yeah, it is. I lean towards the drafting table approach because I think it's so rich to be like, it's not that you're two architects in different styles. One of you is a postmodernist, I shudder to think, and the other one of you is a classicist and wants Greek columns everywhere. And you're partners at this architecture firm. So you're just working on the project together. Yeah. So like, but because you're like the brothers McGregor, you can't help but fight. And even though you're ostensibly working together, and so that's the reason why this would happen, because you wouldn't have a client hiring two. I suppose that's all. That's could be a comment on the sort of bake-off culture of hiring artistic work, but that's an option. But I like the idea of like these two. It's a sitcom premise, right? It's they share an office and they both got this, they've been in their corners working on their own buildings, and then that one client came in and the project was too big, so they've got to work together.
Yeah.
or they'll both lose the lease or whatever on the office they've shared. And so so now they're fighting over what to do, and they don't know it, but the client's going to hate anything because it's a nonsense. But then that's the framework by which the battle takes place.
Yes. I like that a lot.
I've laid it all out. Like, I don't know if you guys like it, but
no, I like that a lot. I've been thinking of the title for this game for a bit, and I think we could call it like Anarchitects or something, like Anarchy and Architects.
That's good, Steven. I love that mix. That's fantastic.
Sweet. Yeah, okay. This it sounds like a good framework for stuff. Should we like lay it out more as a document now? We've got a lot of ideas.
So.
Yeah. I do want to note though that like Ellen, we are turning away from the idea you just had, which is the more the RTS sort of elements. And you're cool with kind of leaving that a little bit behind, or?
Well, for sure, yeah. And I think the drafting table feels a little bit more like a fighting game because like you're these two up and coming architects and you've got to get your ideas on paper so you can be recognized, but turns out there's only like one piece of drafting paper left in the entire building. Gosh, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, did budget for more than one piece of drafting paper.
You're down on your luck, architects, right?
I don't even know, do architects use paper anymore? Like,
well,
it's silly. It doesn't matter.
What's his name? Crumples up paper, and that's how he designs buildings. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. No, I don't. But I want to find that. Look,
is it Frank Gehry?
Yeah.
Hey, so normally we take this time in the middle of the show to ask you to do something for us, like leave a review or give us that precious feedback that Steven loves so much or whatever. But instead, we're going to take this time to ask you to do something in relation to the current moment. And that means donating to causes for racial justice and, spreading the word on efforts that are being made right now. And we're going to try to think about doing that in a way that is both related to our area, game design, and also something which, as time goes on, it gets harder and harder for people to stay on top of this as a subject. And I think that is a failing we all share. So we wanted to give you some things that might help you think about this going forward. And so we collected a couple of examples here. First one is blackgamedevs.com. This is a place that has listings of lots of artists and developers and projects and studios that you can keep up to date. So you can follow them, you can hire them, you can purchase their products, their wares, and support their work.
I should check to see if I'm on that list.
You're going to have to get on it, Steven.
Yeah.
But also, that's a good point, is hopefully people who have never heard of this, who want to be on that list, can find their way to that directory. So blackgamedevs.com. Also, a really common Twitter hashtag you'll see is hashtag drawingwellblack, which is a great way to get exposure for black artists in comics, in games, in animation. And so we'll put an example or two of that in there, but take a peek at that hashtag to get a look at some excellent work. And also share stuff of yours if that's something for you. And of course, we also want to make sure that we talk about, again, things that go beyond this current moment. And a lot of this was inspired by the death of George Floyd. And we, because he's a Minneapolitan and our neighbor, we have focused on that as well in the times that we've talked about it. But there have been other examples of black people killed by police. And one of those is the story of Breonna Taylor. The story is particularly tragic. I encourage you to look into it. But there's a GoFundMe to support her family, and that we'll put that link in the notes as well. So you can check our show notes for those links and some more. And of course, we encourage you to seek these things out for yourself. And don't forget about this, because we can all say Black Lives Matter, but let's keep saying Black Lives Matter.
Okay. Organizing. Design documents.
I was not told that.
We have Ellen on the show.
Oh, then I'm
fine. Actually,
then.
be organized now.
I'm just gonna sit back and witness the organizing.
Okay, so the basic premise of the game is you're two architects who work together, but are competing for pride or fame or something.
Yeah.
And you get this big client that wants a tower designed, but like because you're competing for the credit, you are fighting, and also you only have one sheet of paper because you're cheap.
Right.
Or
You're Frank Lloyd Wright, and you're like right angles, and then you're Frank Gehry, and you're like no squiggles, and like,
yeah, exactly. Okay. So so the goal of the game as a player,
yeah,
you want to design this building such that you get the most credit.
right. You want future generations to be like, that's a building designed by this guy, and then somebody he was working with.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. How do you? Yeah. Okay. How do you do that? We discussed like we discussed the drawing
Oh, now you ask.
aspect of it, right? Like, I'm trying to figure out the best way to like frame it in this document so that like listeners can see
Yeah. So
our whole
there's
thought process.
the goal, the scoring, and the actual battle mechanics. Right. Those are kind
Yes.
of is those our three challenges here,
I believe so.
or am I missing something?
Goal, battle mechanics, and scoring system. No, I think that tracks because that's basically what you need in order to.
Okay.
complete.
Yeah. I feel like we're summarizing what we did in the first half of the show, but it's important because, especially on these episodes, we have lots of ideas. And so I'll listen back to them sometimes and I'll be like, oh, it would have been interesting if we went in that direction instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's important for us to like focus in, and that's what we're doing now.
Yes.
Okay. So which of the first do we want to tackle?
I think it.
Can you list them again?
Okay. So sort of the player motivation and goal, like what you want.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Then the mechanics by which you do it, but that's also how you just the fighting part, right? The how you
Right.
achieve your goal, but also thwart the other's goal. The actual
Mhm.
actions you take, and then the scoring system, which is maybe a traditional fighting game, which is like hit bar or health bars of a kind.
Yeah.
Or maybe I think what we've been describing more is some method by which the round is over, followed by a drum roll and then a reveal. And so what that scoring system is, which I kind of, it's not a super fighting game, but I like it. It's almost boxing, sort of. Like the boxing is a lot of times determined by points. I don't understand boxing, and I'm very, what it's like, is every punch count? I have no idea. But that seems to be more, so it's not super leaving the arena of fighting games, but
Yeah.
Anyway, so those are the
that's
three, which I should have laid out quicker, but
It's fine. I think it makes sense to talk about the goals that the player is going through first.
Okay.
And then we can build on from that.
Yeah.
Right. So as a player, I mean, obviously we've laid out that you want to be the best architect or the most famous one for this tower.
Right.
And you are doing that
Like
in the way you're. Go ahead.
I was going to say earlier we were talking about like, oh, I want lounges. Player 2 wants bathrooms, but then, or do we want it to be? I want it to be modernist, and I want it to be classical. Like, you know what I mean? Because either could work, but I don't know that they could. Well, maybe they could both work. I don't know. Depends on how multidimensional we want this to be.
I think it makes more sense to do it like modernist versus classical because there's. If we're going to have a scoring system and a point system like that, I think it will be more interesting to like base them off of these kinds of themes, like as characters.
You're
like
right.
if I was
more rewarding for the players,
Well,
This
and
is
for us to design it.
This is the kind of thing where like I feel like we choose one, and then if we actually moved forward and developed it, we'd have to learn a lot more about architecture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because and this happens. I think this happens to me a lot because I'll just have an idea and I'll run with it, and then I'll start getting into it and be like, "Oh wait, I completely misunderstood this." So how do I revisit it? But for now, I think that's more of a compelling idea than bathrooms versus lounges.
Okay,
is like battle between design.
Yeah, that puts a bigger challenge on it, but that's okay because we're not making it. So
yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. And so the goal for the player then is to make the most modernist, cubist. I don't. That's not a thing. Is that a thing for architects?
I'm Googling it.
Not if you want the building to stand up, right?
Yeah, I suppose. But like you want it to be the most your philosophy.
Yeah.
Out of all of the floors.
Mm-hmm.
Very Gothic. You're the Gothic architect.
Yeah, so that's the goal.
Yeah.
We're doing here,
and that kind of also means that like there are ultimately like 4 or 5, the schools of thought that will be recognizable to players, to lay people who want, you know what I mean, without having to get into a lot of the details.
Yep. Yes. Okay.
So then the question there is do I know what style you're going for?
I think
like thematically, it'd be like I should always know what you want because but in terms of the making the game interesting, if I always know you're going to go for Greek columns, then how much of that Yomi is required of?
Well, that's why the scoring system comes into play, because I think if you get rewarded for multiple different things, then like maybe you as a player want to go for Greek columns because it gives you the most points, but your opponent has been able to beat those efforts in the past, and so you'll go for something different to counteract that. Yeah. If it was just you want, if you just wanted Greek things and you just got defeated by that, then like you can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and like Greek columns is maybe an element of an architectural style, right? And I think this is where it can actually be. The cool thing about it is like you could have an architect persona for all of the major styles that are listed in this Wikipedia article that I found. And along with each of those styles comes like your move set. And if you have now I'm going to definitely misuse terms, even though I have got the Wikipedia article open in front of me. But like if your style is classical, then one of your moves can be cool column, Greek column, and you can just stick those columns out there.
If your style is postmodernist, then that column services you as well.
Yes.
Right? But you
exactly.
you want it to be like smooth and dumb looking, because you can tell I don't like postmodernism. But
I can tell, yes.
But like postmodernism is this idea that like nothing is anything. And it relies a lot on classical style architecture reinterpreted in a contemporary way. So if I'm a classicist, if that's the word, I want to add the certain kind of roofs or columns or details or patterns. But then if I'm a postmodernist, I can exploit the work of my classical opponent to achieve my goals. Right?
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
If I'm a Gothic architect and I want these big vaulted rooms, then if I'm a modernist, I can be like, haha, they're actually made of concrete pillars, so I win, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool, because like what I'm hearing is like there are some different styles of movesets. So like, you could have one of your buttons is going to be like a destroy button that has a really long cooldown. So you can like knock down someone else's stuff, but it's got a really, not knock down, but like you can like erase it from the paper.
Yeah.
But it's got a really long cooldown. Another one might be like repurposed materials, and that would like someone puts in their marble, and you're like, nope, it's gonna be steel.
Yeah.
Because I'm industrial, so that could be like your B button.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Depending on what my opponent is, then some of my my offensive strategies versus disappointment become my defensive strategies versus that opponent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Oh man. Sound more and more like a fighting game. I love it so much.
Steven, is this the part of the episode where we decide we actually want to make this?
I just had that moment.
Literally every episode, though.
Yeah.
We can always sort of
just had that moment.
At the moment, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's wonderful. I like that.
What's good about this too is that because we're doing this blueprint, then you can't always see who's ahead based on the aesthetics, right? It's only in the judging in which you learn how effective, and so there's some suspense there too, which is maybe that's an interesting mechanic. It's not super fighting game, but I like it about this.
Yeah, I mean, even in a fighting game, like you can never really know who's in the lead until the round is over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you're playing against someone like me who just sucks so bad that it's very obvious.
Well, there's like
who's losing
this sort of like collage style where it's like, so again, button. You should. I'm turned around on this. Like we should have a button mashing strategy that could win you against someone who's really good at this, because otherwise it wouldn't be a fighting game.
Yeah.
Right? Like a rustic folk style is going to have like these like steel girder structures, but also plywood walls, and then like like tin sign decorations or whatever. And someone who's going for a more like a postmodernist solution might not realize that with your little random additions, suddenly it's nothing like what they wanted and 100% what you wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
There would be one. Well, this is potentially getting into interior design philosophy rather than architecture. But like eclectic.
Yeah. Well, if you're Frank Lloyd Wright, then you don't think there's a difference. Famously designed the chairs for the buildings he built and made the owners agree to not move the furniture. Like,
Wow.
a lot of the furniture he built was built into the wall out of fear that the owners would move it because he was kind of a jerk.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Okay, okay, so that kind of sounds like how you like fight, I guess. It's like that's kind of the mechanics.
Right.
Each style, design philosophy for architecture has their own like button things they can place down.
Right, and there's like there's like punch or whatever, which is just like place a detail. But then there's like a special move, which is to turn this into something or whatever. So and we don't need to necessarily list them, but there's basic moves and special moves, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and
cool.
Basic moves would be really similar, from persona to persona, from character to character.
Mm-hmm.
But like special moves would be really different, and
some of them would be wild, and some of them would be really hard to pull off. And some of them require a certain set of conditions before you can employ them, right?
Yeah. Like, I don't know. There's got to be there's got to be some architectural philosophy that's kind of like a mishmash, and your special move could be like, "That was my idea."
Right. It's not even just doing something; it's just like taking
Stealing
credit
it.
for random events.
Putting your initials on the blueprint.
Yeah,
mine.
Yeah.
So if this is blueprinting, now I'm starting to think a little bit about aesthetics, but like, if in our very weird architectural design firm, we are drawing on paper, it's one sheet of paper, then maybe like each of your characters would have a different color and texture of writing utensil.
Oh, I like that.
So like, then you could differentiate by color, and also by like the marks that you're making. And then if you ended up with that special move where it's yoink mine, then it like changes the color and changes that to your writing utensil.
Oh,
so
that's
like
pretty good. That's pretty good.
Player one's writing kind of like in chalk, and player two's got like a nice pen and something like that. Just making it easier to differentiate what's happening visually.
Yeah,
that is
in the fight.
Yeah, there's something to be said about like not like needing to keep it in your head as a skill, but I like the idea of having it marked and then being able to manipulate that with special abilities.
Mm-hmm.
I like that quite a lot.
You can make it an option actually. Like if you want to make it crazy hard mode,
like
and you take off. Like in the difficulty setting, you take off. You can like remove the writing utensil differentiators and the color differentiators and just black scribbles and chaotic madness.
But this actually like thinks about like there are other ways you could expand the play styles of this. So like what if you have two of the because you can play like Ryu with the normal colored gi and then the Ryu with the purple colored gi or whatever. So like you could what if you had like two of the same and then the winner is who just had the most influence even though you're going for the same thing or something.
Oh yeah.
So like there could be you could have lots of different multiplicative ways to interact with these kinds of mechanics, and one of those would be then you can't. It's harder to tell who did what if you're both using the same color pencil or something.
So again, pulling from the Wikipedia article I have, you could have two Byzantine architects.
Ooh.
And whichever one of you Byzantine architects harder than the other is going to win that round.
I don't know that. Is that a style where you just put doors everywhere?
Let me click on it and find out.
Oh no, we're going down the rabbit hole.
It just gave me more links. I don't know what I'm doing. I give up. This is scaring me.
So one of the things, thinking about like marking on a sheet, maybe one of the moves can be like just sketching a note, which is like instead of actually changing the plan, maybe a faster move would be like note to contractor, knock down this wall, or we changed our mind. And then that maybe is easy to erase, but it requires effort from some, you know what I mean? So there could be lots of different dimensions of how permanent your effects are, right?
Yeah. And it kind of obscures your goal too, because if you just write a note to knock down this wall, it in the moment it could appear like a wall.
Yeah.
I suppose. And then during the scoring thing, that wall disappears because they knocked it down. Quote,
right.
unquote.
But maybe only if there's enough in the budget for revisions from the contractor. So
sure.
I'm not going to knock down the wall because it'll be easy to just draw the wall back because it doesn't cost anything. But if I put a note there, then maybe that means that I need to make sure I save some, so there could be different ways to do the same thing. Or it could be a feint, right? It could be, I'm going to put a note here to knock down the wall so that it takes up the other player's activity to not only erase that note, but think that I want that wall gone. But I don't actually want that wall gone, or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's good. I like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Guys, I admit I didn't pay attention to that last exchange because I'm too busy reading about Byzantine architecture in the columns.
Well, I'm uninterested in what we were talking about as well because I want to learn about Byzantine architecture.
Byzantine columns are quite varied, mostly developing from the classical Corinthian, but tending to have an even surface level with the ornamentation undercut with drills.
Oh my goodness.
Now figure out how we're going to code that in.
Yeah.
I'm going to close this before I get myself in more trouble.
Good call. It kind of sounds like we have an idea on how the scoring system should work anyways now, right? Well, I guess we didn't detail it specifically.
We have a general idea, I think.
Yeah.
That might be enough.
I don't think
might be enough for our purposes.
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, so do you want to, maybe you can outline what you think we've got in that area?
Well, in terms of scoring, yeah, it's not, I mean, you get scored based on how Byzantine or how much philosophy is in your drawing. And specifically the way that we're scoring it would be different properties of the design get scored in different ways.
Yeah.
The way I was thinking of it was everybody wants columns, but some people want more columns, some people want less columns, some people want different kinds of columns, and things like that. But maybe that's not the direction we're going in. Maybe it's more you each have your own unique things that nobody else really wants. You get scored based on that.
And I mean, maybe that is just a mix of that, right?
I think it should be a mix of things
because you all want the four walls, right?
Yep.
And so that you all have to, or you all the two players need to both contribute to the creation of those four walls. But one person wants floor to ceiling triple pane glass, and one wants it as brick, and so. Yeah. And then, but at the same time, then there are some things that are unique to your style that may be a little hard to achieve. But maybe if you get that thing you wanted in the corner, it's the other player can either work to get rid of it or work to get something of their own instead. So then you have choices as to how to combat because you're going for influence ultimately, not necessarily destruction, or total domination, right?
Right.
But like a fighting game, if you have you can have a flawless game. Where it's where you suffer no hit on your influence, and it's all your influence, right? That would be a perfect fighting match. But most matches should be both are bruised heavily. So whatever building you come up with, it will not make it into a textbook.
No, it would be terrible.
Right? It's going to be credited to one more than the other, but it's not going to be great.
Yes.
You're both come away bloodied in a metaphorical sense.
Yeah, okay. I think that makes sense. Yeah, it should be a mix. Definitely should be a mix of things. Definitely should. But, yeah. I guess I'm having a hard time, putting it on the paper.
Yeah, I think that part of the reason we're having a difficult time is we reached a point where, we actually would need to test some ideas.
Yeah, we have to start building it. Yeah.
In the mind space before we can actually say, well, yeah, okay, the scoring is going to need to have this kind of structure because here we have these two personas or two characters that we've made, and these are the movesets that we've used. So, I think we're at the point where we can't really think it through anymore. We have to start testing it through.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. What's worth how many points and how do you?
Yeah, we're not gonna be able to figure that kind of stuff out.
No.
So
No.
are we ready to call this one totally perfect and then be done with it?
Yes.
The only thing I could think of maybe doing next is like coming up with movesets for a couple characters.
Yeah, we could do that.
So do we want to have them be like famous architects from history in each of these styles? Do we want to invent new characters of our own? How do we want to handle that?
Yeah, I think we've settled on. It seems like we've settled on through conversation and healthy non-fighting debate that we want to go towards like different architectural styles.
Yeah,
I think each of those architectural styles could be represented by a character.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we want to pull them from real architects from history explicitly, because I think that is going to be constraining in a couple of ways. One, formal architecture isn't particularly diverse.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Very true.
Right?
You see photos of all these architects and you could just shuffle them up. They all kind of look the same.
Well, right. In my mind, they're all like gray busts of dudes with curly hair and marble. That's not accurate, but like that's how I'm picturing
it's not far
it.
off. Like,
but like, so I think we'd want to make sure our characters they're people, right, from the real world.
Yes. We want to be aspirational in a sense that like because the point of this perhaps would be to get people interested in architecture, and like we don't want to lead with a bummer of a bummer historical fact, right?
Yeah. Right. I think we can I think we can and probably should reference real architects in like the material in the game, for sure.
Right. We don't want to hide from that fact. We almost, if possible, maybe even confront it.
Yeah, we should confront it.
Mm-hmm.
That's for like when you actually start writing. Yeah, I guess. But the other thing too is if we create our own characters, we can also create our own architectural styles.
I like this.
Yeah.
Which should be cool. You could make an architectural style based on cats. I don't know, man. Like this is, but the kind of thing that you should be thinking about now in your design process. It's not something that like you should only, it's not something you should be thinking about as your mood board. This is like has design implications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's probably too common that you don't think about it until it's too late to make it a core of your design, right?
Yeah.
You can't patch it in later, right? You'll be making choices that prevent you from handling it in a way that's sort of mature and nuanced.
Yeah.
So for sure. Okay, so and like I said, there's actual practical benefits, which is that we get to do a lot more creative work ultimately, which is sort of what we kind of want out of this. So that's good. Okay, so we have a solid kind of like the thing that's great about this design document is like we have a bunch of really great pillars, and then we get just detailed enough that we could really start working on this. There's almost nothing that anything we work on, we have something to reference to know if we're doing it the way we wanted to or not. That is like some of the, even though it's pretty loosey goosey here, the way that we've written it out, that's what a good design document needs. Right?
Yes.
Your dogs agree?
My dogs agree. I was trying to be quiet so we didn't have to edit it. I don't know what to do about this.
It's fine.
Well, how about we end the show? Does that sound good?
I'm dying here.
That's our show. Check out our website, nicegames.club, for show notes and links to resources on today's topics. If you like this episode, give us a review on your favorite podcast app and tell all your friends. Independent podcasts like ours rely on word of mouth to grow. We love hearing from our listeners. For a quick way to give us feedback on the show, head over to nicegames.club/feedback and fill out a short little form. You can also get in touch with your nice host on Twitter at NiceGamesClub, where we tweet about game dev resources and resources for racial justice. Or you can email us through contact@nicegames.club. Ask us questions, suggest topics, or just say hello.
So until we start again, remember to
play nice
and make nice. Okay.
Well, yeah, you seem to know the most about architecture out of all of us, even though I worked for an architecture firm.
I'm an enthusiast, so I've read a lot of Wikipedia articles. That's as best as I can offer.
He doesn't just mean an architecture enthusiast. He's a Wikipedia enthusiast. Local polymath, Mark LaCroix.